We had the perfect suburban life. A beautiful house with a manicured lawn, 2 luxury cars in the driveway, and successful careers that allowed us to live comfortably. I worked as a financial consultant while she climbed the corporate ladder at a marketing firm. We were the couple others envied, at least that's what I thought. The revelation came when I decided to surprise her by bringing lunch to her office. It had been a particularly stressful week for her, and I wanted to do something nice. As I walked through the office doors carrying her favorite meal, I noticed something odd. People were staring at me, some with subtle smirks, others quickly averting their gaze when our eyes met. When I reached her department, I overheard a conversation that made my blood run cold. A group of her coworkers were laughing, and one of them said, "So, did he really cry after? I can't imagine a grown man sobbing like that." Another replied, "That's what she said. Apparently he gets really emotional during those moments." I instantly knew they were talking about me, about a deeply personal experience I had only shared with my wife during a vulnerable moment. I stood there frozen as they continued to discuss intimate details of our bedroom life, my insecurities, and even private arguments we'd had. When they finally noticed me, the awkward silence was deafening. One of them cleared her throat and pointed toward my wife's office. I walked past them, my face burning with humiliation, the lunch bag suddenly feeling like it weighed 1,000 pounds. I found her laughing with 2 other colleagues. When she saw me, her expression shifted from amusement to surprise, then quickly to discomfort. She introduced me, but I could see it in their eyes. They knew things about me no stranger should ever know. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her tone suggesting I was intruding rather than being thoughtful. "I brought you lunch," I said, placing the bag on her desk. "But it seems you're already being well fed with stories about our personal life." Her colleagues quickly excused themselves. Once we were alone, she tried to dismiss my concerns. "You're overreacting. It's just office talk." Everyone shares stories about their partners. Stories about their partners crying, about their sexual performance, about their deepest insecurities. My voice remained low but intense. The betrayal cut deeper than any knife could. She rolled her eyes. "It's not that serious. Nobody cares as much as you think they do." But they did care. They cared enough to laugh, to remember, to look at me differently. In that moment, I realized our relationship had been fundamentally violated. Every time I had opened up to her, trusted her with my vulnerabilities, she had been collecting ammunition to entertain her colleagues. I left her office without another word, ignoring her calls. As I walked to my car, my mind raced with questions. How long had this been going on? What else had she shared? Who else knew intimate details about me? On the drive home, something changed inside me. The initial shock and humiliation began to transform into something else. A cold, calculated anger took its place. I had been made a fool of for too long. That night, when she came home, I acted normal. I asked about her day. I smiled and nodded at all the right moments. But behind that facade, I was already formulating a plan. If she wanted to expose our private life, she would soon learn that 2 could play that game, only I wouldn't be careless. As she slept beside me that night, I stared at the ceiling, mentally dissecting every aspect of our relationship, searching for the leverage I would need. The woman lying next to me was no longer my trusted partner, but an opponent who had drawn first blood. My revenge wouldn't be impulsive or emotional. It would be methodical, comprehensive, and ultimately devastating to the reputation she so carefully cultivated. The following week was a masterclass in deception, mine, not hers. While maintaining a facade of normalcy, I began collecting information. Each morning I left for work as usual, kissed her goodbye, and pretended everything was fine. But everything had changed. Our conversation the night after the office incident had gone exactly as I expected. She downplayed everything, called me too sensitive, and somehow twisted the situation to make me seem controlling for objecting to having my private life broadcast to her colleagues. When I pressed her about specific details she had shared, she became defensive, then aggressive, accusing me of overreacting to harmless office banter. "You need to lighten up," she said, waving dismissively while checking her phone for the 5th time in 10 minutes. "Everyone shares stories about their partners. It's how people bond." "There's a difference between sharing and humiliating," I replied, watching her closely. "You crossed that line," she scoffed. "It wasn't that serious. Besides, it's my life too. I have the right to talk about my experiences." That was the moment I fully understood what I was dealing with. She genuinely believed she had done nothing wrong. In her mind, my feelings were irrelevant compared to her social standing at work. The tears I had shed in private moments, the insecurities I had trusted her with, the intimate details of our bedroom. All fair game if it earned her laughs or camaraderie. The next morning, I began noticing things I had overlooked before. How she turned her phone away when texting. How she had recently changed all her passwords. How our conversations had become increasingly superficial. These weren't new behaviors. I had simply been too trusting to recognize them. I decided to dig deeper before making my next move. When she left her laptop open while taking a shower, I discovered dozens of messages between her and her coworkers. What I found made my stomach turn. Not only had she been sharing intimate details about me, but she had been actively flirting with several colleagues, sending messages that crossed every boundary of our marriage. He has no idea how boring he's become. Read one message to a male coworker. Sometimes I wonder what it would be like with someone who actually knows what they're doing. Another exchange revealed she and her work friends had a dedicated group chat titled Husband Horror Stories, where they all shared embarrassing anecdotes about their partners. My wife was by far the most prolific contributor. I took screenshots of everything, saving them to a secure cloud account she couldn't access. Then I cleared my digital tracks and returned the laptop exactly as I had found it. That evening, she mentioned an upcoming company retreat in 3 weeks. It's mandatory for all department heads, she explained while scrolling through her phone. We'll be gone from Thursday to Sunday. Team building exercises, workshops, the usual corporate nonsense. I nodded sympathetically while my mind raced with possibilities. 4 days where she would be surrounded by the very people she had entertained at my expense. 4 days where alcohol would flow freely at evening networking events. 4 days that could provide exactly the opportunity I needed. That sounds exhausting, I said, playing the supportive husband. But I'm sure you'll make the best of it. She looked up briefly, almost surprised by my understanding tone. Thanks. It shouldn't be too bad. Over the next 2 weeks, I maintained my performance flawlessly. I was attentive, affectionate, even surprising her with dinner reservations at her favorite restaurant, all while methodically preparing for what would come next. I used my lunch breaks to research the people she worked with, social media profiles, professional backgrounds, connections within the company. I needed to understand the ecosystem she operated in to effectively dismantle her position within it. I also consulted discreetly with a divorce attorney, outlining my situation without revealing my plans for revenge. I wanted to understand my legal position before proceeding. The attorney confirmed what I suspected. In our state, her behavior didn't qualify as legal grounds for a favorable divorce settlement. If I wanted justice, I would have to create it myself. 3 days before the retreat, I noticed her spending an unusual amount of time preparing new outfits, salon appointments, even a shopping trip for lingerie she claimed was just in case the resort has a nice spa. I simply smiled and told her I wanted her to enjoy herself. As she packed her suitcase the night before departure, I watched her carefully select which items, including an expensive dress I had never seen before. My anger had cooled into something more dangerous, absolute determination. She had no idea what was coming, but soon her carefully constructed world would crumble just as mine had that day in her office. The next morning, I kissed her goodbye and wished her a productive retreat. As I watched her car disappear down our street, I allowed myself a brief, cold smile. Phase 1 of my plan was complete. Now it was time for Phase 2. With the house to myself, I had 4 days. Plenty of time to gather what I needed. First, I went through her home office methodically, examining documents, checking drawers, and searching for anything revealing. My thoroughness paid off within the first hour. Hidden beneath a false bottom in her desk drawer, I discovered a second phone. My hands trembled slightly as I powered it on. It was unlocked. She clearly never expected me to find it. What I discovered confirmed my worst suspicions and justified everything I was about to do. Messages, photos, videos, all exchanged with multiple colleagues, including her direct supervisor. Their exchanges weren't just flirtatious, they were explicit. In some conversations, they even discussed their encounters during working late nights, complete with location details and timestamps, nights when I had been home preparing dinner, waiting for her. I felt a wave of nausea but forced myself to continue. This wasn't just about embarrassing stories anymore. This was full-blown betrayal on multiple levels. I connected the phone to my computer and backed up everything, organizing the evidence chronologically. The oldest messages dated back nearly 2 years. Next, I turned to her main laptop. Using passwords I had discreetly recorded over the previous weeks, I accessed her email accounts. Her professional correspondence was mostly legitimate, but her personal email contained a trove of information, conversations with friends where she mocked me, hotel reservations for business trips that coincided with days off for her supervisor, and exchanges with a lawyer about exploring options regarding our shared assets. By evening, I had compiled enough evidence to destroy both her marriage and her career. Company policy strictly prohibited relationships between supervisors and subordinates. The explicit content shared on company devices during work hours violated multiple corporate conduct policies. Everything was meticulously documented and backed up in multiple secure locations. But I wasn't finished. This was just the reconnaissance phase. The following day, I reached out to a former colleague who now worked in digital security. Without revealing specifics, I asked about hypothetical ways to recover deleted messages from social media platforms. The information proved invaluable. Using specialized software and the access I had to her accounts, I recovered months of deleted conversations, including detailed discussions about how to hide their affairs and what to do if I ever became suspicious. On the third day, I made several phone calls, first to our bank, where I confirmed unusual transfers to an account I didn't recognize, then to our shared credit card companies, where I discovered charges for gifts and hotel rooms never mentioned to me, finally to my attorney, updating him on the financial discoveries without revealing my larger plan. By the evening of the third day, everything was in place. I had created an encrypted file containing all the evidence, organized by category: infidelity, financial deception, workplace violations, and personal betrayal. I had also drafted several emails addressed to specific recipients: her company's HR department, the board of directors, key clients she worked with, and our closest friends and family members. These emails wouldn't be sent immediately. Timing was crucial. On the final day of her retreat, I received several messages from her describing boring workshops and complaining about colleagues. The irony wasn't lost on me. According to the evidence on her secret phone, she had spent the previous night in her supervisor's room, with messages planning another rendezvous for the final evening. I responded with supportive, oblivious replies, asking when she would be home the next day and mentioning I was planning a special dinner. I said I missed her, playing the role of the clueless, devoted husband perfectly. That evening, I made my final preparations. I transferred half of our joint savings to a new account under my name only. Perfectly legal and justified given the circumstances. I gathered important documents and stored them securely off-site. I changed the passwords to our home security system and cloud storage accounts. Then I poured myself a glass of whiskey and sat in our living room, surrounded by the life we had built together. Photos on the walls from vacations and celebrations. Furniture we had chosen together. The space that had once represented our shared future. It all looked different now, tainted by what I knew. As I sipped my drink, I reviewed the plan one final time. It wasn't just about hurting her as she had hurt me. It was about systematically dismantling the false reality she had constructed. She had used my trust against me, weaponized our intimate moments, betrayed our vows, and planned to leave me financially compromised. Tomorrow, when she returned home, would mark the beginning of her reckoning. She would arrive expecting her predictable, gullible husband. Instead, she would find someone she didn't recognize. Someone who had seen every deception, recorded every betrayal, and engineered a response that would leave her professional and personal reputation in ruins. I finished my drink, closed the files on my computer, and went to bed. For the first time in weeks, I slept deeply and without disturbance. The calm before the storm. I woke up early the next morning with a renewed sense of purpose. Today was the day everything would change. I prepared the house meticulously, removing any signs of my investigation. I made coffee, prepared breakfast, and even placed fresh flowers on the dining table, a perfect scene of domestic tranquility. When I heard her car pull into the driveway around noon, I positioned myself casually on the couch with a book, the very picture of an unsuspecting husband. She walked in, looking tired but satisfied, dropping her bags by the door. "Welcome home," I said, smiling warmly. "How was the retreat?" She launched into a carefully edited version of events, describing tedious team-building exercises and productive strategy sessions, no mention of late-night rendezvous or inappropriate communications. I nodded attentively, playing along with her charade. "Sounds exhausting," I sympathized. "Why don't you take a shower and relax? I've prepared lunch." She seemed almost touched by the gesture, kissing me briefly before heading upstairs. The moment I heard the shower running, I moved quickly, placing her secret phone on the dining table next to her regular phone. Then I returned to my position on the couch and waited. 20 minutes later, she came downstairs, hair damp, wearing fresh clothes. She stopped abruptly when she reached the dining area, her eyes fixed on the two phones side by side, her face drained of color. "Looking for something?" I asked calmly, not moving from my seat. "Where did you—" she began, but her voice faltered. "Find it," I finished. "In your desk, along with several other interesting items." I set my book down and stood up. "Sit down, we need to talk." For once, she followed a direction without argument. She sank into a chair, eyes darting between me and the incriminating device. "I know everything," I said simply. "The affairs, the lies, the money you've been hiding. I know about the lawyer you've been consulting. I know what you've been saying about me to your friends and colleagues." She attempted to interrupt, but I held up my hand. "I'm not finished. For the past 3 weeks, I've been gathering evidence. Every message, every photo, every video, every financial transaction. I have it all documented and secured in multiple locations." Her expression shifted from shock to calculation. I recognized that look. She was determining the best way to manipulate the situation. "It's not what you think," she tried, her voice adopting that familiar tone of reasonable condescension. "You're misunderstanding." "Am I misunderstanding this?" I asked, picking up my tablet and playing a video I had recovered from her secret phone. The footage clearly showed her entering a hotel room with her supervisor, followed by a timestamp showing they remained there for over 3 hours. I stopped the video after a few seconds. "Or this." I swiped to display bank statements showing transfers to her hidden account. Or perhaps I'm misunderstanding these. Another swipe revealed the explicit messages exchanged during work hours on company devices. Her strategy shifted instantly from denial to damage control. "Fine. I made some mistakes. We both have. But publicly exposing this won't help either of us. Think about what people will say about you, the clueless husband. Is that really what you want?" I had anticipated this exact response. "That's where you're wrong. I'm not the clueless husband anymore. And I'm not interested in hiding your behavior to protect your reputation. Or mine." Her eyes narrowed. "What exactly do you want?" "Justice," I said simply. She scoffed, some of her usual arrogance returning. "Justice? Don't be dramatic. What does that even mean?" "It means consequences proportional to actions. You used our private life as entertainment. You betrayed my trust in every possible way. You plan to leave me financially compromised. Now you'll experience the full repercussions of those choices." For the first time, I saw genuine fear flash across her face. "What have you done?" "Nothing yet," I said, standing and maintaining eye contact. "But tomorrow morning at 9 a.m., emails will automatically be sent to HR, the board of directors, your clients, our friends, and family, each containing relevant evidence of your behavior." She bolted upright. "You can't do that. My career will likely be over," I finished for her. "Just like our marriage." "I'll deny everything," she threatened, but her voice lacked conviction. "With what credibility? The evidence speaks for itself. Videos, messages in your own words, financial records." I shrugged. "Deny all you want, it won't change the outcome." She switched tactics, suddenly moving toward me, expression softening, eyes welling with tears. "Please, we can work through this. I made mistakes, but we have history. 12 years. Don't throw that away." I stepped back, maintaining distance. "You threw it away. Every time you shared our private moments for laughs. Every time you slept with a colleague. Every time you planned your exit while pretending everything was fine." Her tears vanished instantly, replaced by cold fury. "You'll regret this. I'll take you for everything in the divorce." I smiled, genuinely amused by her misunderstanding. "No, you won't. The prenuptial agreement you insisted on has a fidelity clause. The evidence I've gathered invalidates any claim you might make for alimony or additional assets. In fact, my attorney believes I have grounds to reclaim certain assets already." This final revelation seemed to stagger her. She gripped the table for support, her carefully constructed world visibly crumbling around her. "You have until tomorrow morning to pack essential items and leave," I informed her calmly. "The emails will be sent regardless of what you do. But I'm giving you the courtesy of not having to face me when it happens." "Where am I supposed to go?" she demanded, anger and panic competing in her voice. "Perhaps one of your many partners can accommodate you," I suggested. "After all, You've been so generous with them. Surely they can return the favor. As I walked toward the door, intending to give her space to process her new reality, she called after me. Wait, please wait. Her voice was desperate now. There must be something I can do. Some way to stop this. I turned back, studying her. Even now, she wasn't sorry for what she'd done. Only sorry she'd been caught. Only concerned about saving herself. There's nothing you can do, I said with finality. The consequences of your actions start tomorrow. I left the house, closing the door on her protests. In my car, I took a deep breath, feeling a weight lift from my shoulders. Phase 3 was complete. She knew she was exposed. She understood her powerlessness. Now all that remained was the final act. The public revelation that would ensure her reputation would never recover. I spent that night at a hotel, giving her space to pack and leave as instructed. Early the next morning, I received a barrage of texts and calls from her, alternating between threats, pleas, and promises of change. I ignored them all. The automated emails were set to deploy at exactly 9 a.m., and nothing would stop them now. At 8:55 a.m., I parked across the street from her office building, not to confront her, but to witness the beginning of the fallout. Through the glass facade, I could see her at her desk, phone pressed to her ear, likely making a final desperate attempt to reach me. She looked frantic, disheveled, a stark contrast to her usually polished appearance. At precisely 9 a.m., my phone buzzed with confirmation that all scheduled emails had been sent. I watched as phones and computers throughout her office began to chime with notifications. Her assistant's eyes widened while reading her screen. A colleague walking past her office stopped abruptly, staring at his phone in shock before looking up at her through the glass wall. She was still on her phone, unaware. Then her desk phone lit up. Her computer pinged, then her cell phone. The cascade of notifications finally caught her attention. I watched as she slowly lowered her phone and turned to her computer screen. Even from a distance, I could see the color drain from her face as she began to process what was happening. Her head snapped up, eyes darting around at colleagues who were now staring openly at her. Some huddled together, looking at shared screens. Others whispered behind hands. Her supervisor emerged from his office with a grave expression, followed by someone I recognized as the HR director. They headed straight for her office. I had no desire to watch the confrontation. This wasn't about witnessing her humiliation up close, but ensuring justice was served. I drove away knowing the wheels were now in motion. The evidence was irrefutable, the damage irreversible. By noon, my phone was flooded with messages from mutual friends and family expressing shock, concern, and in some cases apologies for not seeing through her facade sooner. I responded selectively, only to those who had always been genuinely supportive, explaining that I needed space and would reach out when ready. I returned home in the evening to find she had indeed cleared out many of her personal belongings. The house felt different, lighter, somehow, despite the emotional weight of the day's events. I changed the locks anyway. Just as I finished a simple dinner, the doorbell rang. Through the security camera, I saw her standing on the porch, makeup smeared, hair disheveled, clothes wrinkled. I considered not answering, but decided this confrontation was inevitable. When I opened the door, she pushed past me into the house. "You've destroyed me," she hissed, voice raw. "Are you happy now?" "This isn't about happiness," I replied calmly. "It's about consequences." "Consequences?" she nearly screamed. "I've been suspended pending investigation. Everyone at work has seen those messages, those videos. My clients are dropping me. My friends won't return my calls. My parents..." Her voice broke. "My own parents said they need time to process before speaking to me." "And what did you expect?" I asked. "That your actions would never catch up to you? That you could betray everyone in your life and walk away unscathed?" "What you did was worse," she insisted, pacing the living room. "I made mistakes, yes, but you calculated this. You planned this humiliation meticulously." I laughed without humor. "Interesting perspective. You humiliate me for years as entertainment, plan to leave me financially devastated, cheat repeatedly, and somehow I'm worse for exposing the truth. You could have just asked for a divorce," she countered. This was vindictive. "A divorce wouldn't have been justice," I explained quietly. "You would have walked away with your reputation intact, possibly even cast me as the villain in your narrative. You would have continued using other people's trust against them. Someone needed to show the world who you really are." She collapsed onto the couch, the fight suddenly draining from her. "What am I supposed to do now? Where am I supposed to go?" "That's not my concern. You managed to orchestrate an elaborate double life for years. I'm sure you can figure out your next steps. I moved toward the door and opened it. Now, please leave. The locks have been changed, and your access to all joint accounts has been suspended pending the divorce proceedings. She stood slowly, a dangerous glint returning to her eyes. This isn't over. I'll find a way to make you pay for this. You're welcome to try, I said, unmoved. But remember, I still have copies of everything. Any action against me will only result in wider distribution of the evidence. She flinched. Without another word, she walked out, shoulders slumped in defeat. As I closed and locked the door behind her, I felt no triumph, no vindictive pleasure, only a profound sense of closure. The woman who had violated my trust and planned my downfall had finally faced the consequences of her actions. My phone buzzed with a text from my attorney confirming our appointment the following morning to formally begin divorce proceedings. Everything was proceeding exactly as planned. Her professional reputation was in ruins, her social standing demolished, her carefully constructed image shattered beyond repair. The last piece would be the divorce itself, a process I was now in complete control of. 6 months have passed since the day justice was served. The divorce was finalized faster than expected. Her lawyer advised her to accept the initial settlement offer rather than risk further exposure in court. She left with only her personal belongings and the car registered in her name. No alimony, no property rights, no shared assets. The prenuptial agreement she had insisted on years ago, believing it would protect her superior earning potential, became the very instrument of her financial downfall. I sold our house. Too many memories, both good and bad, lingered in those walls. I purchased a modern apartment downtown, closer to my office, with floor-to-ceiling windows that flood the space with natural light. A fresh start in every sense. News of her professional collapse reached me through mutual acquaintances. After her suspension, the company conducted a thorough investigation, uncovering even more inappropriate workplace behavior than what I had exposed. She was terminated with cause, eliminating any possibility of severance or recommendations. Her supervisor was also fired, though he landed on his feet through connections. Men in his position often do. She wasn't so fortunate. Industry circles are small, word spreads. The last I heard, she was working in retail, a significant step down from her executive role and six-figure salary. Her social media accounts went dark shortly after the divorce. Mutual friends say she moved to another state, attempting to outrun her reputation, a futile effort in the digital age. Some might expect me to feel guilt for the thoroughness of her downfall. I don't. Each consequence she faces is directly tied to her own actions. I merely ensured those actions were brought to light. The justice wasn't in my exposure, it was in everyone else's reaction to the truth. My own healing has been more complex than I anticipated. Trust doesn't rebuild easily after such profound betrayal. I've been seeing a therapist weekly, working through the layers of deception that colored 12 years of my life, identifying red flags I missed, understanding why I allowed myself to remain blind for so long, and recognizing patterns I must avoid in the future. Professional success has been an unexpected byproduct. Without the constant drain of suspicion and the energy required to maintain a failing marriage, I found new focus. My consulting business has expanded. I've taken on high-profile clients who appreciate my attention to detail and methodical approach, the very traits that served me well in exposing the truth. Dating again seems premature. Though opportunities have presented themselves, I've declined politely, explaining I need time. The right connection will come when I'm ready. Last week, I received a letter from her. No return address, but the handwriting was unmistakable. I considered burning it unread, but knowledge is always preferable to ignorance. The letter contained what some might call an apology, though couched in language that still shifted blame. We both made mistakes. She described her struggles since the divorce, financial hardship, social isolation, depression, and suggested we meet for closure and a new understanding. I didn't respond. There was nothing to say. The closure she seeks exists only in her imagination. We will never speak again. Some nights, lying awake in my new home, I reflect on what could have been different. If she had been honest, if I had been more observant, if we had addressed issues before they became insurmountable. But these are pointless exercises. The past cannot be rewritten, only learned from. What surprises me most is not the depth of her deception, but my capacity for renewal in its aftermath. The human spirit is remarkably resilient. We can endure betrayal, humiliation, and loss, yet still find strength to rebuild, to trust again, to seek joy. There's a certain power in surviving someone's worst, In discovering that what they thought would destroy you merely revealed your capacity for rebirth. She believed her actions made her powerful. She never understood that authentic power comes from integrity, not deception. The gossip at her office has long since moved on to newer scandals. Her former colleagues rarely mention her name. The clients who dropped her have found new representatives. Her carefully constructed world collapsed completely, and life continued without her. That is perhaps the most fitting consequence of all, realizing how quickly the world adapts to your absence. As for me, I no longer define myself as a victim of betrayal or even the architect of an elaborate revenge. Those were chapters in my story, not the complete narrative. I am simply a man who refused to accept injustice, who valued truth over comfort, who had the courage to ensure that actions met their appropriate consequences. Tomorrow marks exactly 1 year since that day at her office when I first discovered her betrayal. I plan to spend it hiking a mountain trail I've been meaning to explore, moving forward, gaining new perspective, breathing freely in the knowledge that the hardest climb is already behind me. The revenge wasn't in destroying her reputation. It was in reclaiming my dignity, my future, and my power. In that sense, the victory was complete from the moment I decided I deserved better. Everything that followed was simply the world adjusting to align with that truth. Our story has come to an end. If you've made it this far, how about subscribing to our channel? It helps us immensely. I've selected 2 other videos for you that I'm sure you'll enjoy. Feel free to click on them. I'll be waiting for you in the next story. See you soon.